Okay. Should we just start
Today
out?
we are talking about marketing objectives.
Which is Chapter 7.
Chapter
of our
7,
Belch and
yes.
Belch book.
Yes.
Yep.
Many companies don't realize that marketing objectives are important to every marketing campaign. Why do you think marketing objectives are important?
Oh, they're important to, there's a number of reasons, but basically to set where you're going.
Set where you're going.
Yeah, and so, that's the first thing is making sure that you know where you're going. The communications, the whole communications within a company, and this is what we're going to do. The planning and decision making and then the measurement and evaluation. Those are all some of the objectives that we'll get into here in a little bit, but as from a company standpoint, it kind of really just gets people on the same page, and it allows you, to keep going. So as we look at that, there are a number of reasons why companies do have those objectives. And can you list a couple of those objectives?
Yeah, companies should have marketing objectives because they facilitate coordination, various groups working on the campaign. So everyone within the company, between sales and et cetera, are working together. They work between the ad company and also the company itself, so that these objectives, they should be written down, and so everyone should know clear, so that when the company and the ad company don't really talk on a daily basis, both of them know what the specific objectives are.
Yeah, that's right.
And problems are avoided when clear written objectives are given between both. Don't you agree?
Oh yeah, you definitely have to have them down on paper and know where they're going to go with that. Yep.
So.
Yep.
And all these objectives should be reflected in budgeting, public relations, publicity, sales promotions, and reseller support. So all these different areas within the company, they all should be reflected in that. Objectives also give a benchmark for success or failure for promotional campaign. So when you set your objectives, you have to say, what do we accomplish at the end? And you can base that on what your objectives were.
Right, yeah. And so as, you definitely want to get to the end and say, okay, yeah, we did accomplish this, we did what we set out to do, we didn't do it, and, by having, again, down on paper and making sure you get to the end of knowing exactly what happened and how to make adjustments, where to go from there.
Where to go from there.
Yeah. And so once they accomplish that, there's how do you tell, okay, like I said, you get to the end, it might not have been successful, or is it a failure? So in your way, how do you tell if a marketing campaign has been successful?
By measurable objectives, which are very important. They specify a method and criteria for determining how well the promotional program is working.
Yeah.
So you need to be able to measure it. Some companies measure them by awards. Some companies measure it by 15% increase in sales, by increase of market shares. So
yeah, and there's another part in there too, and it's a lot of times they set what they call a benchmark. Yep. And so some certain companies are doing this, and so we're going to set a benchmark, and we're going to try to achieve that.
We'll be talking more about that later.
All right. Okay. Good. Yep. So definitely the measurability is important when it comes to that, and so the marketing objectives. Okay, so what exactly do you think that marketing objective is?
Marketing objectives are generally stated in the firm's marketing plan. They are statements of what is to be accomplished by the overall marketing program given in a time period.
Okay. All right, so if you got this overall, how do you determine that, within the marketing, what determine that good marketing objective?
Good marketing objectives are quantifiable. They delineate the target market and note the time frame for the accomplishing the goal. Often the time frame is 1 year. Yep. Some have an overall objective, like a sales increase volume. Some have secondary marketing objectives, such as sales, profit, and market share. But your secondary marketing objectives must relate to the overall objective.
Okay. Yep. One of the things that in the business world, a lot of people talk is the ROI, It's called the return on
yes,
investment.
yes.
And so, you know, that's an objective and a term that people hear a lot when it comes to the measurement. What is your ROI on that? Return on investment.
And we'll be talking about return on investments when we talk more about sales-orientated objectives later on in this.
Later in the chapter.
Yes.
Okay. All right. And then, so now we've got some specific areas where we're heading toward. How does it play into the whole overall integrated marketing communications, integrated marketing aspect?
I'm glad you asked. There are specific
Yep.
integrated marketing communication objectives, which are statements of what various aspects of the integrated marketing channels program will accomplish.
So what are those based on?
They should be based on a particular communications task required to deliver appropriate messages to the target audience.
Okay.
They should also reflect your generally marketing goals. So.
Yep. So as you look at that, reflecting the whole marketing goals, and you review everything, you put it, with the promotional planner, see how it's all integrated, and so then this is what we're hoping to achieve, and so they put it all together, bring in all the other elements of the marketing mix and the promotional elements, and put that all together.
So the next step is to set objectives and turn us to specific communications goals or tasks, which is sales or communication goals.
Right.
Okay.
And so we'll cover that in the second part.
Yeah, second part. Yep.
Okay.
Great.
All right, good.
So next we're going to be talking about what are some goals of objectives.
Okay. Yeah. So there's different objectives, different goals, and this whole part of the whole sales and marketing objectives kind of working together. And
there are two main objectives: sales orientated and communications orientated.
Okay. And so now we're going to talk about what those objectives and what do I see in the business world that are out there. There's when you talk about the sales, everyone, what's the bottom line?
Exactly.
You hear it in the newspapers, especially when we've had the recession the last few years. What are your sales from this year to last year? And usually it goes by months, not by okay, what did you do last year? Some industries you like that, but it's usually by year. So what did you do in December of last year? Because it's the holiday season, and so you're not necessarily comparing November to December all the time. It's a year out, and so they do set objectives that way.
Okay. Do you see any more in the small business world? Do you see any more communications, like promoting them, or do you see more sales orientated?
When it comes to the business, I think the smaller businesses, a lot of times you're looking at the sales, but if you're a relatively new company, again, it's the communications, getting the name out, and keeping the awareness, and versus the big brands. A lot of times they're just advertising their brand and the name, but I see it's more important for the smaller company to get the awareness out, not necessarily the branding. But the smaller companies they're gonna be more interested in the sales, probably because they're so highly leveraged, taken by the banks and their investors. They want to see what's our progress and where we're going with that for on the smaller ones. Yep. So those are some of the objectives that are out there for that. So trying to think where else do we want to go with the next. There's some Geico's. Just giving you some examples. Okay, I don't know. Some of the things that are on there, and we'll talk about that. We'll talk about that in a little bit later. So okay.
So. Sales-oriented marketing objectives. Companies usually only go with sales-oriented marketing objectives is to sell money.
Yep.
Managers generally compare investments options on a common financial basis, that is, return on investments. And more companies have made agencies more accountable for their performances. Agencies then differentiate themselves on return on investments in regard to how their integrated marketings will be. So advertising agencies will only advertise themselves as agencies that only do sales-orientated advertisements.
Yeah. Can you what do you mean by that? Can you give me an example of what you've seen in that?
Well, Heinz ketchup actually went up 19% in sales increases. That's because they went to a specific advertising agency and they said, we only want to see an increase in our sales revenue.
Okay.
Can you name any other?
I'm trying to think of some offhand. Geico.
Yeah.
Geico's one that when they went from, I think it was 4th all the way up to 1st.
Yeah.
In new customers. That's an example of that. And you think of all the ads that are on with Geico and their little gecko. yeah, running around.
You see a lot of new, and they kind of appeal towards new customers. They don't really appeal towards returning customers, though.
Right.
So they're only going for that new increasing sales revenue. It's very temporary. See.
So they're and so that's one of the reasons why they don't work. As well.
It's because sales are often very temporary, and so the long-term aspects are kind of diminished by that.
Right, and so some of the
other
reasons.
Other reasons are why sales objectives don't work are, well, the product design and quality. Sometimes the quality of the product is not so good, and
word gets around, and they find out that it's
And sometimes the quality is good, but the packaging is just very boring and not very appealing to the customer.
Yeah.
Sometimes companies find it hard to distribute and kind of get into their niche market, and it's not readily available to some. Some just go into Target, some just go into small businesses.
Right.
And also, pricing is very, very important in marketing. Sometimes you have a really good marketing campaign and it's just too spendy.
Right.
Kind of like the iPads. They had a really good marketing campaign, but they were just too spendy for a lot of people to afford them right away.
Right.
But later on, when the price diminished, then you see more increases in volume.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see as the new iPad comes out and on the processing of all of that as well. And so where the price structure kind of goes up and down on that. Yeah.
So I guess the main reason behind marketing is that to make consumers more aware and interesting, but unfortunately that doesn't force them to buy anything.
Right. There's a saying that's out there: nothing will kill a poor product faster than good advertising. And
exactly.
That's one of them. That's on there. I'm going to just kind of briefly talk a little bit about the carryover effect.
Okay.
With the sales and advertising. A lot of times the sales might, or the promotion might happen, and the sales don't really come, but the word got out there, and there's not that impact of sales right away, but eventually down the road it does, and that's where it becomes hard on measuring a lot of times.
Exactly. For return on investments.
Right. Yep. So you're saying, okay, our sales didn't really increase in the last 3 months because of our campaign. Well, but 3-4 months down the road, all of a sudden maybe something was going on in the economy or something, and
exactly.
And now all of a sudden they're willing to buy. And
so it's very temporary. Sales-oriented objectives should be.
So it's temporary and carry over. You just don't know how far that's gonna go.
There are some places where sales-oriented objectives are appropriate. When you're doing a direct response advertising. So that means when your merchandise is mailed directly to the customers, when you advertise in newspapers and magazines through the internet or on television. You see this most in retail advertising. You try to attract customers during certain sales periods. For example, Black Friday, you see
all those.
So that's where sales-oriented objectives should be used, is when when there's a
Right.
specific time
Yeah.
period where
Yeah.
you're advertising
Yeah.
for.
Time period, and as well as other things such as 100-year anniversaries and
100-year anniversary, yeah.
you know, things like that, or we're in 10th year of business, or you know something where it's again very specific.
Yeah.
You know, and they try to really promote a certain point. Yeah.
For more famously is about Domino's. Do you know anything?
Um,
Domino's just recently went through a new campaign where they revamped their image, and their sales increase actually went up by 15%.
right. Yeah.
So,
Yeah. And so yeah, they going through that. You know, they did spend a lot of money on trying to get the word out that, you know, Domino's is new. You know, it's a new image. There's a new product, you know, new ingredients or whatever it was that was involved with that. They really did put a lot of money involved in that. Yeah, so that, you know, again, increasing it 10% into a company like Domino's is a lot.
I guess the overall conclusion for sales objectives are marketing and brand managers under pressure show sales results often take short-term perspective, so very short-term. They're looking for a quick fix and for declining sales or loss of a market share. They ignore the pitfalls of making direct links between advertising and sales ad campaigns, as well as agencies may be changed as sales expectations are not being met. So they're looking for short-term goals, and they don't realize that other stuff may be involved, like the economy and stuff. So.
Yeah, that's right. And so as you look at this, can you explain the whole communications objectives, that process a little bit more? You know, as we get into, you know, what the consumers are talking about.
You were talking about the carryover effect, and we also were talking about Domino's. Domino's, another good thing that they did was they really revamped their image, which is a very good communications objective, where they're more promoting their image rather than a sales perspective. Advertisers realize they must provide relevant information and create favorable predispositions towards the brand before purchase behavior will occur. So what that means is that you must have a good image for the company before any sales can come.
Yeah.
Do you see any communication objectives in businesses?
Yeah. You know, as I look at, you know, small businesses again, you know, early it's getting the word out. Okay, and that's an objective that that's out there. I think one of the other, you know, communications versus the sales, the communications, I look at like hospitals and, you know, medical organizations, whether it be Mayo or Sanford Health or, you know, those types of organizations, Mankato, even here locally, the Mankato Clinic. I mean, they're promoting, you know, they're getting the word out in the communications, not necessarily how many patients and, you know, all of these things, but it's a whole communications model that they're going through.
Okay.
And so that's, you know, some of the things that I can see, you know, that some businesses do. Again, the, you know, awareness of, you know, whether it could be just through public relations, getting things in the newspaper, articles written about you, about that company, whatever it might be. Those are all part of the communications process that don't necessarily have a direct impact on the sales, you know, but eventually it will.
Okay.
And so that's, you know, kind of the communication objectives in, you know, in
the business world.
Yeah. So, you know, as you think about that, you know, those are some areas, you know, that are some. And can you think of some that you might want to talk about?
I should tell you about the communications effects pyramid. What the communication effects pyramid is just this pyramid that advertising agencies go through, and so what the pyramid is they first go for lower level objectives such as awareness and knowledge, and then as the advertising agencies go up, it becomes harder and harder to advertise towards people, and you lose people as you go along. Pretty soon you go from a 15% sales increase to a 5% in sales increase, because it's harder and harder as you gain more and more people to have your product.
Yeah. And then, you know, there's all the ways to establish the certain objectives for a brand. You know, and the first thing you got to do is talk about who that target market is.
Yeah,
and where
target market is extremely important when you're doing a communications effects pyramid, because you really need to know who you're going for.
Yep. You have any examples of that you could?
Oh, Caribou Coffee.
Yeah.
They're actually a Midwest business, and they started in around Minnesota, and they decided to go towards a national scale business, which means they needed to revamp their image a lot to attract more target audiences. So because in LA it's different target audience than Minnesota, because it's so cold here, so they're kind of going towards the cold factor, whereas in LA they might just go for the overworked, overstressed people who just really need coffee. So they needed to revamp their image, and around the Midwest actually they kept their initial logo, etc., and they changed a little bit on it. And the first sorry.
It's okay. Yeah.
They first decided to see what the Minnesotans would do with that new logo, and the Minnesotans said that they really liked that logo. So they did it on a national scale, and now they're actually doing really well on the national scale, and they're right behind Starbucks in second place.
Yeah.
So
yeah, they're going to be competing against Starbucks, and you know, as part of that. But again, you just think about Caribou, and it's kind of a northern animal, and you know, but you know, and yeah, how do they get away from that in LA or the South where it's cold?
They made their initially the Caribou Coffee, their logo looked exactly like a caribou. It was and now they changed it kind of something to it looks like squiggle marks that look similar to a caribou, but doesn't appeal to that northern aspect anymore.
You know, those are some of those some more communication objectives. You know, what are some of those objectives that you can see?
Some communication objectives are increasing the percentage of consumers in the target market who associate specific features, benefits, or advantages with the brand. So, like in Caribou, they were trying to attract more people, and not necessarily more sales. So just create more awareness. And then you increase the number of consumers in the target market who you prefer the product over the competitions. So you try to get more people to come to Caribou than for, say, Starbucks. So
away from the competitor. That's always a big aspect.
You encourage current users of the products to use this more frequently than or in more situations. So you try to get them to come back instead of, and then encourage consumers who have never used the brand to try it. So you just really try to get the new people to come in.
Yeah, you know, encouraging them to use more frequently. I think that's one of the things that you see in coffee. It's not just the morning thing anymore. It's a lunch or something before lunch. You're going to go meet with somebody at Caribou. Let's go have a cup of coffee.
It's more of a social aspect, and so you see that more. You try to get the return on.
Yeah, it's just not that jolt in the morning that you need, or you
Yeah.
know, it's an all day, or you know, maybe it's in the afternoon. You know, those types of things. You know, so that's the more frequent, and maybe it brings in other people too as well, like you said. So, but there's, you know, you look at there's a lot of problems as well. You know, within the communication objectives, and but people, one of them is that they only see it as a sales objective. Okay, and versus that.
Yeah, they only see you only see marketing as a return on investments rather than putting up a good image. For example, ExxonMobil, they weren't getting a really good image. And did you see all the commercials they were sending out about how they were trying to help the environment, etc.? That's a good idea for a communications objective marketing, because they were just trying to put a good name to the good face to the name. I should say. So, but you see in the smaller business world, especially with like internet and internet companies, you see that they're just trying to get more sales in. But the only one that's not really doing that is Google, they're just trying to put more good favor into Google, get more customers, and you see they're trying to get the family aspects in their commercials.
Yep, that's right. So that kind of wraps up kind of the second part that we're talking about.
Second
and
part.
We'll visit on the third part in a little bit?
Yep.
Okay, now we're going to get into the third and final part of this chapter, and in setting marketing objectives.
Yes.
So how, Rachel, how do you set marketing objectives?
Well, many businesses use the DAGMAR approach, which is DAGMAR. DAGMAR stands for Defining Advertising Goals for Measured Results.
Mm-hmm. And this is a model for creating those advertising objectives and then measuring them in the end, and finding what the results of that campaign really are. So, the main thought behind DAGMAR, is it's the communications efforts that are logical basis for advertising goals and objectives against which success or failure should be measured. So I'm going to read that again because it's a good one to know. It's the communication efforts that are logical basis for advertising goals and objectives against which success or failure should be measured.
Okay.
So it's talking about success and measurement and all of that. So what do you see more with DAGMAR?
Under DAGMAR, an advertising goal involves a communication task, which is a specific and measurable task. What are some communication tasks for DAGMAR specifically?
There's 4 of them. I'll just talk about the first 2 here real quickly. The first one is awareness. We got to make sure that the consumer is aware of the product or the service, the existence of the brand. What's that company? A new company. Okay, so that's the first one, is awareness. The second one is the comprehension. Do those customers understand what do you do? I know we had a problem with that with our company, the Sports Institute. What do you do? People didn't know what we did. Were we just a workout facility? Were we for adults? Were we for kids? And okay, so all of a sudden now we started getting the name and the logo out there, but people really weren't sure of what we did. And,
what you did.
Yeah, and so that's part of that whole. So we needed to educate people on the understanding of what we do and what we could offer them. So those are the first 2 parts of the task for DAGMAR.
Also, conviction, which is developing a mental disposition in the consumer to buy the product. So you need to convince the consumer to buy your product over another one.
Yep, definitely.
And action, which is getting the consumer to actually buy the product. So with those, you can do like a sale aspect or a promotional package that involves getting action into the consumer.
Yep. Yeah. So what are we talk about these, but what are now let's get into the characteristics of the DAGMAR's objectives. So can you list a few of those?
Well, you need concrete, measurable tasks. So your objective should be precise. Precise statements of what appeals to the message the advertiser wants to communicate to the target audience. So you need to, like you were saying, you need to have clear communication to the consumer.
Right. Yep.
They focus on increasing customer satisfaction, and in the end are now, and in the end you want to be on top. Right. So be number 1 basically. Yeah. Be like Starbucks and, for instance, Caribou. Yeah. And they also need to be measurable. For example, you need to, like Hyundai, because they were last in the car sales, and they realized that, and their goal was to create more of a better image for themselves, more customer satisfaction. Right. And they sent out commercials, etc. for that, and in the end they won many awards for.
They did, yeah. Yeah,
they won many awards for the customer satisfaction in their cars. So that's a very measurable objective.
Yeah. So you take those measurable tasks, be very concrete. And then you take it into what would be the second one. Second characteristic is that's the target audience. And you know, this is important to defining, you know, who that audience is, and you know, you define it by geography. There's lots of ways that you can define it. You know, geography, demographics, the psychographics, behavioral. You know, all of these are going onto the, you know, the usage.
So how did you find out what your target audience was for your business?
You know, one of the things that we, you know, it was, you know, we knew our customer was the person that was going to be using it the most was going to be kids.
Kids.
Okay. But they weren't necessarily the ones looking at the advertising. They weren't necessarily the ones purchasing them from, you know, the product, because it was the parents. And so it was really interesting. Our target market was kids, but yet at the same time we had to include the adult parents as, okay, you know, we had to market to them and be in front of them, you know, because they were the ones actually purchasing it for the kids.
So it's very important to establish your target market.
Yeah, and, you know, we just thought, okay, well, kids will all talk and they'll be out there, and so really in the sales, you know, on the sales objective, the target market was more so the parents and the kids.
The parents and the kids. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Another Jagmar objective is benchmark and degree of changes sought.
Mm-hmm.
To set your objectives, one must know the target audience, recent status concerning your awareness, knowledge, image, attitudes, and intentions, and then determine the degree to which the consumers must be changed by the campaign. Mm-hmm. So target audiences, beliefs, and etc., they change consistently, especially recently in the last 10 years when we had this recession. You know, people who are more apt to spend money, they now are saving money so that they can so that they have more money for food and gas, etc.
Because salaries and layoffs and all those. So spending habits really did change, and on that, and you know, you look at the benchmark measures,
which is determining the target market's present position regarding the various response stages required. Establishing benchmark measures gives the promotional planner a basis for determining what communications asks need to be accomplished and for specifying particular objectives. It's very important to determine whether or not the operation was successful, and that's why you need benchmark measures.
You know, there's benchmarks in all the industries. Okay, you're gonna, even schools. Okay, so you look at, say, Bethany here for an example. Our benchmark would be other schools with our same population, maybe you know, private liberal arts colleges. Okay, so we're benchmarking against. We want to pick some schools that we think are very successful in, whether it be in retention or graduation rates, you know, ACT scores, whatever it might be, and then we set that benchmark to the successful ones. It's hard to benchmark ourselves against, you know, say a Harvard. You got to set realistic benchmarks in that sense, where you're comparing the same, and that's why benchmarks are important. And then getting into the last one, you know, you want it over a specific time period. Okay, you don't want to just say, okay, we're just out there and there's no time frame. You've got to be able to say between this date and that date.
Where you want your ad campaign to go.
Where it's going to go, and we're going to measure it, you know, so we have something, a start and a stop, and that's a big part of that.
You said earlier that smaller businesses usually go for a month-to-month basis, and bigger businesses kind of go from a year-to-year basis. So
you'll hear, you know, like the news and stuff, they'll say same month sales, and you know, so the bigger businesses, you'll do that. Smaller businesses are always wondering, okay, can I stay afloat? Can I keep going? What are my sales? And did we increase in sales over this last month? But you still got to look back and into the, you know, previous year or 2 years to see the trends, and you know, there's this cash flow method of, you know, some months are just going to be, people are going to be more willing to spend than other months.
For example, with this recession that we're going through, some people might see an increase in sales, but it's still lower than what 2005 sales were. So you need to just look at that and realize that your benchmark could be making it the same sales as with 2005 overall.
Right.
So
Yeah, yeah. You hear a lot of people saying, you know, pre-recession sales, or, you know, where were you, you know, number of homes being sold, you know, prior to, you know, 2007, or, you know,
Exactly.
or, you know, and so you'll hear that a lot as well when there's big, like you said, like a recession that could change some of those.
So what are some criticisms of Dagmar?
You know, probably the biggest thing of that is the hierarchy. Okay, we're going to do this. We're going to go. It's kind of the steps, and a lot of times people just don't go as a process. Sometimes it's, I'm just going to go purchase something. I'm not going to go through the whole awareness, go through the whole process of that. And so some people, like I said, the hierarchy of the Dagmar, it becomes clumsy at times. You know, and sometimes it's hard to work within that process.
Yeah, you see in the World Wide Web, it's changed buyers' decisions making from a more linear one to one which consumers can kind of be kind of circular, more of a 3D type of decision making process
Yeah, that's a very good example of how, you know, it is. It's not just this linear step by step. That's important.
Another one is sales objectives. Many people think that the only objective is to get sales, and Dagmar does not do that. They're more of a communications. They're kind of incorporating both communications and sales objectives. So many criticisms are just like, there's only one objective, only the sales. That's the only thing you can do.
Yeah.
So
right now you've probably seen it in the last year or so that the big push for surveys. You know, every time you go somewhere, it's okay. You get a receipt. On the back of your receipt, there's a, you know, call this number or take this on the internet and you get a free fry, or you know, something like that, or and that's a big push. Okay, the sales are important, but they're trying to get more information. I recently bought a cell phone. Yeah. And you know, they're pretty upfront. You're gonna get a call back to ask how I did as a salesperson, and you know, those are you know, not necessarily just the sales. Yeah, he made the sale, but did he do a good job of that person that was selling it to me? And that's as important in getting the communications method, you know, message out, you know, to people, and so that's why you see so many people talking about fill the survey out, survey, because it's not always just about the sales.
So what's another criticism?
You know, practicality and costs is another thing, especially for smaller businesses. It costs money to go through this process and evaluate, and time-wise, you know, is it just practical? Maybe it's not practical for my business. You know, we're small. We don't have, like, again, and time is part of that. And so, you know, going through the hierarchy, but just the practicality and costs, it's time-consuming, and you know, a lot of times you get mixed up in the whole process, and it just not really successful.
They think that only large businesses have the money to spend on Dagmar, which is not necessarily true. You know, Dagmar can be a very small, can work on a very small scale too. So, another one is inhibition of creativity. Dagmar, it's a step-by-step process, and creativity can be drowned in there, especially to the people who are working in it. And they want to do more of a creative aspect, but they can't because they're following Dagmar. And many people believe that it's on passing the numbers test rather than developing a message that is truly creative and contributes to the brand equity. So they just want to get more people rather than promote the company. So so this is an interesting chapter, you know, of bringing all of this together, and the measurements, and you know, Dagmar. There's a process to it, and exactly. I know I learned a lot from why we need marketing objectives, and the differences between sales and communications objectives are highly important. You really need to know what you want when you're marketing.
And there's a mix. I mean, there's a need for a mix of both. You know, there's
exactly
the importance of part of it, and how it all fits into that integrated marketing communications process, and so don't take it lightly, and you got to continue to look at all those aspects that we just talked about. Well, thank you.
Well, thank you, and thank you.
All right.